One of the most rapidly growing technologies is Azure Backup. This is a subscription service, so you do need an Azure subscription, but it gives you protection off-site. So if your location were to have a fire or some disaster like a hurricane or flood, you would still be protected. Azure Backup can completely replace your current backup solution, or it can extend your on-premise solution. Now, many companies currently will use some type of off-site backup. Now, you can do that through various service providers where you just back up across the web. Pretty common. For 20 plus years, a company in my area called Iron Mountain would come around and pick up your backup tapes on some schedule. So you would back up everything on site. They would show up in their truck and you would give them your backups and they would take them off site to a secure location. If you ever needed those, they would simply bring them back to you and you could restore them. Well, instead of having some person drive by and pick up our tapes, paying for that service, you could simply have them backed up to the cloud. Now, this could be your only backup solution. Many companies will do that. So whatever we back up from our on-premise environment, we simply back it up to the cloud. Other environments will decide we want our backups to be stored locally on-premise, but I also want a copy to be stored in the cloud, so I do have protection from a fire or some type of site failure. So depends on your goal if you want to completely replace or if you just want to extend. Some of the most important features of this will be automatic storage management, meaning I am not concerned about capacity. This has unlimited scaling, meaning you will never get to a point where it says, we're sorry, you can't back up any more data. Now do keep in mind, with these two things, you are paying for storage. So the more you back up, the more it actually costs. So that's something to keep in mind, but you will never truly outgrow this. Where if you had an on-premise solution, you back up to appliance device, something like that. It has a finite amount of capacity, so you'd have to monitor the growth of that storage. It is encrypted. Between your on-premise environment and Azure, the connection itself is encrypted, and the data once backed up to Azure is encrypted, so we have just peace of mind knowing it's secure. I could also, as we said earlier, completely offload my on-premise backup to Azure, so I don't need appliances or any other backup solution in my on-prem environment. Just back up everything to Azure through that Azure subscription. And this may be far less expensive than your current solution if you have purchased an on-prem solution. I can also back up Hyper-V and virtual machines to Azure, and you can also create virtual machines in Azure. If I create a virtual machine in Azure, you do want your virtual machine to be backed up. So I can also have Azure backup VMs I've created in Azure in addition to my on-prem VMs. Now, I did say a moment ago that you could use this to offload your on-prem backup, and you could possibly even save yourself money if you had a paid-for solution. One of the concerns with the Windows Server backup we talked about, if you have 3 servers, I'll just call them 1, 2, and 3. With Windows Server backup, you have to go to each of these servers and install the backup feature and then configure the backup individually. There is no centralized capability in Windows Server backup. So what some companies do is buy Microsoft's Data Protection Manager, or DPM. This is Microsoft's centralized backup solution. Now, they'll often say an enterprise backup solution. There are also tons of third-party backup solutions that do the same thing, where you have some device somewhere that has that software installed on it, and now you can manage backup configurations across all your servers. None of those are free. You have to buy the third party. If you're using Microsoft's Data Protection Manager, you actually have to go purchase that. So it's not built into the operating system like Windows Server. So what many environments will do, as common as Azure actually is, even if they have been using DPM, many environments will forego that and now just use Azure Backup as part of their solution. To implement Azure Backup, I do need to install the Azure Backup agent on my servers I want to back up. And I also need to configure this Azure Recovery Services Vault. Now that's really Azure Backup. That's what you actually create in Azure to back up, is this recovery services vault. This vault will hold all the backup data from my Azure services, my virtual machines, regardless of what operating system they run, SQL, anything you run in Azure. In addition to backing up things you may have in Azure, it's going to hold your on-prem components, whether that's file servers, Hyper-V hosts, virtual machines from on-prem. It's going to store all that as well. In Azure, just a limitation, you can have 25 separate recovery services vault per region. Now, Azure is broken out through region. So you have like a US East, US Central, US West. There's a region for Brazil. So you have all these different regions around the world, but up to 25 recovery service vaults per region. That is more than really anyone would actually need. And Azure Backup for files and folders relies on that Azure Recovery Services agent being installed on the client or server. Well, as we mentioned a moment ago, you could also put this on, say, Windows 10. Your client OSs could have this. So this can be your complete solution for your on-prem backup if you choose, or just some part of your overall solution. Depends on exactly what your needs are.